Hey, I'm Magic. This is Trendlines, brought to you by Oracle'sElixir.com. We're doing a very special episode today. I'm joined by Calvin, who you may know from the hit web series Calvin Calls It, occasionally on my Twitter. Today, we're going to look at whose stock is falling, whose stock is rising in the NA LCS following Week 7 of the 2017 Spring Split. Let's lead with everyone's favorite, underrated North American top laner. We're going to continue to celebrate the year of Hauntzer. As a team, Team Solo Mid's trend line, I'd say, has been a bit wobbly lately. We've seen some positives, some negatives, some things that make us question them a bit. But Hauntzer individually has been pretty great. He's got a huge role in the team. He's their most reliable initiator this split, partly since Bjergsen doesn't really get to play initiators in this meta. Some assassins and things like that, but there's no Lissandra or these kinds of things that allow the mid laner to really be the one starting the team fights in a really assertive sense. So Hauntzer been a really good team fighter and asserted himself that way, which has been really important for TSM, and it's a big reason why Hauntzer has had a better record on tanks than carries. When TSM asks someone else to be the initiator, they sometimes falter because the rest of them aren't, those who have the tools available aren't necessarily executing on them as well as Hauntzer is. Hauntzer also, he's adding really good laning value for the team. In Week 5, we saw how well he defended Dignitas's attempts to snowball into him with Chaser and Someday attacking him, trying to dive him and gank him. And Hauntzer's ability to resist those plays was one of the biggest factors in TSM's 2-0 win in that series. In Week 6, he did very well in lane as well, despite some jungler pressure. He executed as a good duo with Svenskeren as a top jungler duo. And with that kind of laning play, he's resulted in a mid-range CS difference at 10 minutes, but he's second among top laners in experience difference at 10 minutes. He's fourth in gold difference at 10 minutes. He's doing a lot to serve the team, and it's been really valuable, even though he gets a fair amount of attention from the enemies. Hauntzer also tends to split push a lot. It's part of TSM's overall ability to control the map is how well he plays in the side lanes. We've seen that Hauntzer, not only is he second in CS per minute and CS share post 15 minutes behind Someday in both cases, but he still leads all top laners in kill participation, which shows you how well Hauntzer's been able to play the side lanes and then join the team to make plays like I was talking about his initiation before. We're also learning lately that Hauntzer can consistently play carries. It's not Hauntzer's ability or inability to play carries that has been the issue. Like I was saying before, it's his teammates' inability to be the initiators and play the team fighting role that he would fill on tanks otherwise. We're seeing better lately that TSM are learning how to use his carry play. He had that massive Rumble snowball against Dignitas in Week 5. He played a couple of good Camille games against Envy. He did play Camille in TSM's loss to Envy, but that wasn't on Hauntzer's shoulders, in my opinion. That was TSM not using their comp correctly. So Hauntzer's confidence playing carries, and more importantly, the team's confidence of how to play around him when he's on a carry, should be rising, and I really want to see more of that going forward. So Hauntzer, been really good. Another, not in this case a player, but a team whose stock is rising, to me, Phoenix One. In weeks 1 to 4, they had some strong moments. They had some really good play from certain players, but overall they were working on just a 4-4 series record. The last 3 weeks, they've got a 5-1 record. They're really climbing up the standings. They took a series over C9, but they did have that one loss to CLG. So overall, minor inconsistencies, but they've become what we kind of hoped they would, which is a couple of really quality Korean carries surrounded by an above-average domestic core. And that's, there are no real weak links in this team, and that's allowing them to perform very well. The core has changed a little bit over time. It's not quite, we were expecting Zig and Ori Adrian. Right now, we're mostly working with Zig, Meteos, and now Stunt, but they're still, the mix is a little different, but it's still executing more or less the same way. This team is really solid all around. They've got clean macro. They set up objectives quite well, even if, as we saw in the CLG series, sometimes they set up the objectives really well, but they didn't pull the trigger effectively. They didn't use that setup with their vision control and their wave control. They just didn't act on it for some reason, but they generally have had really good objective control and macro. They've got pretty good team fighting. Ryu is doing a ton of work in the side lanes. Arrow has been the best AD carry in North America without question. And especially their dragon control has been really noticeable, just to throw that in with the objectives. We've also seen that Arrow is capable of playing Ezreal just as well as he plays all the utility champions like Ashe, like Jhin, Varus. And he's, with Ezreal coming up to the 4 of the meta, Arrow has been one of the AD carries in NA, really asserting himself on that champion and being a primary carry. The weak AD carry pool in North America in terms of players, and the generally weak initiation sense in the league relative to some of the other skill sets, do make it a little easier for Arrow than it might otherwise be. If Phoenix One did make it to MSI, for example, he might have a bit of a harder time, both in lane against some of the stronger international AD carries, and in team fights against some of the stronger initiations from other teams. But, domestically, obviously he's doing very well, and I think he should continue to. In terms of the domestic core, Meteos has been... pleasant surprise doesn't really characterize it right. He's been quite good, and I would have expected him to be kind of average. His ability to play the Zac and do the team fighting with that, the initiation and playmaking, has been really useful for P1. I've liked what Zig is doing for the team, playing kind of his traditional low econ role that we saw from him in the past, but he's also got that Gangplank and that Jace kind of trump card to add the flexibility to the team, keep opponents on their toes. So I like a lot of things about this team and the way they're coming together as a whole package. And maybe the biggest thing the biggest two things being how clean their macro is, and just the fact they don't have any obvious weak links. A couple of question marks if I was going to go for something. As is usual for North America, they've got some problems with proactive initiation, which is why the Zac on Meteos is so cool to see. Something that addresses a potential weakness. Also, bringing in Stunt helps a little bit with that, because Adrian is a little more of a passive protective player. Stunt definitely has a more aggressive play style. He's picked up the Thresh and things like this, and just the way he positions, the way he moves on the map is more aggressive. Some question marks too around whether Meteos can hold up over time, because my feeling is that to beat Phoenix One, you want to get an advantage over Meteos. Okay, Victor. You want to get an advantage over Meteos in the jungle and use that to assert yourself over Phoenix One to shut down Arrow, shut down the split pushing, these kinds of things. So this is kind of what CLG did, is they got at Meteos and they used that to get advantages across the entire map. I wonder how well Phoenix is going to hold up in the next 2 weeks. That should be pretty good, but I think that Team Liquid could be a bit of a challenge, because what Team Liquid have with the new setup of their roster with Double Lift coming in and now Adrian and all the things that have changed there, Team Liquid have what, in theory, what most teams in North America don't really have, which is a combination of a jungler who is good enough individually to attack Meteos, and also the ability, in theory, to play as good macro and better team fights than Phoenix One. So there are teams in NA who have good enough junglers to assert themselves and assert some dominance over Meteos. So you could look at Lyra and Envy, but Envy doesn't have the late game team fighting and shot calling that Phoenix One has. Then you've got teams like Cloud9 who absolutely have the late game team fighting and shot calling, but don't have the jungler who can one-on-one just, shut down Meteos, because Contracts isn't quite there. That's not his point of strength. So Team Liquid, if things come together with Rain over attacking Meteos and then Double Lift getting a little more comfortable and asserting himself in the team fights, that could be a challenging team for Phoenix One. But there's so many question marks around Team Liquid, it's really hard to say they are going to do well. It's just that's a matchup I'm very interested in. Phoenix One in general, big thumbs up from me. I want to see them finish strong, and I think that it could make the playoffs a really cool three-way race. Now, one last point. I want to talk about a team whose stock has been falling. This is a rehash. This is something I've talked about in the past. I've talked about it probably way too much, but obviously it's FlyQuest. They are 1-6 in their last 7 series. We don't really need to go into details. Everything that's happening with this team is what we anticipated from back before the start of the season. They sustained their hot start longer than I think anyone anticipated, but their struggles over the last 3 weeks shouldn't really be surprising. It's all the things, they just can't seem to win with standard compositions, all these kinds of things. They might still coast into the playoffs, just given how good their start was, but I wouldn't call them a favorite in any of their remaining series necessarily, and I think falling out of the playoffs is definitely a possibility, depending on how everything shakes out in the next 2 weeks. So this has been Trendlines for Week 7 of the NA LCS. Remember to visit oracleselixir.com for all of your in-depth player, team, and champion statistics and analysis.